So I'd like to begin where we often do in this series, completely appropriate for a mountain book festival. It's just to ask you, what role did climbing literature play in bringing mountains into your lives? Rick?
Oh, I guess as a student, I started to read the classics of British mountaineering. Tom Patey's book, Joe Brown's book, Bonington's book. I started to get inspired at that stage.
As a kid?
As a young student. Yep.
Okay. And Sandy, how about for you?
Well, I'm a bit different, I suppose. Like when I was really young, I liked Call of the Wild and those sort of books. I really liked that. And then, of course, I got into the Robert Service poems, Working Offshore, and all those, ballads from the Yukon and things. And then even in Scotland, a really book that made a big impact on us climbers was the Yvon Chouinard book about ice climbing. And it was a really good book. It was really technical. But in between, there was all these little stories about these guys on white-walled tired cars, driving down, going to Patagonia, etc., doing fantastic routes. And it was just totally inspiring. And I think a lot of Scots just really thought that was an amazing book. And there was a really good part in it about, climbing with the Scots and how the Scottish climbing scene was a little bit in a league of its own, or a bit different. I forget the term they actually used, but it was really, really inspiring to me.
And as a point of national pride then for you as Scots as well, that idea that somehow Scottish climbing had a character of its own?
Well, it's got a character of its own, that's for sure, but not really national pride. I'm a sort of child of the world, I guess, and my soul goes around the sun and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. Talk a little bit about when climbing first struck you. How did you get into it? What was the genesis of you as the climbers that you became today?
My parents took me hill walking in the Lake District, but then when I started rock climbing as a student, they said, "Well, what are you doing that for?" And I was like, "Well, whose fault is this?" It was a group of students at Birmingham where I was studying who took me out on rock for the first time and gave me. One day was enough for me to know this is what I wanted to do.
Right. And for you, Sam?
I was born in Dalwhinnie Distillery, which is a tiny little distillery in the middle of nowhere. And my father was a manager there. So, even as small kids, my twin brother and I would go, wandering about. And there's plenty of stories of our bigger brothers coming to rescue us, being stuck up to here in snow. But of course, you're only this high. And so we're always in the hills all the time, like right from, just being very young children, really. And then I didn't actually start climbing till I was 19. And I saw some people climbing on this crag very close to my house now called Craigdhu, which is a very famous crag in Scotland. And I thought they were totally nuts, but I had to go up and see what they were up to. And then a friend of mine bought a second-hand rope from an instructor at Glenmore Lodge, and then we started rock climbing.
And the same kind of feeling for you as it was for Rick, that once it captured you, you knew that that's what it was going to be for you?
Yeah, I was training as a distillery manager. I left school and I wanted to be a shepherd and just chase sheep and crawl around the hills and stuff. But I realized that wasn't really very economical after doing it for being a lambing shepherd and things. And I realized that wasn't really a very good way to go. So my parents convinced me to go into whiskey distilling and follow my family's footsteps, as it were. But, so I got to the stage of being a distillery manager at 20. And I just started climbing, and I was climbing reasonably well for the time. And I just took my holidays to go to climb on Ben Nevis up for all of February, saved up all my holidays, and that year it was a really blank year and there was no climbing, so I just gave up my job then and started going climbing. Fortunately, the oil rigs were coming into the North Sea, so I started roughnecking and that sort of thing just to make money. So worked 2 weeks on the platforms and then 2 weeks climbing, moved to Chamonix. The rest is kind of history.
Talk a little bit about the kind of culture of climbing in Britain at that time. How was it for you to enter into that scene? Was it an easy thing to penetrate? Did you have people that could be mentors for you, readily accessible?
For me, I guess I met a succession of people who were really, really pivotal, influential in my climbing life. Who they were totally inspirational. And open and invited me, and it started from university friends and then friends in Fort William, who I moved up to Scotland. Clearly the only place I could possibly consider taking a job was in Scotland. So I only applied to companies that had offices in Scotland. So that kind of made it a foregone conclusion. And I climbed with a succession of people, some of whom, in fact, John McCall knows. Great Scottish climbers like Mick Geddes and Con Higgins. And then from there, I met people who were going to the greater ranges, and they were just open doors for me, and the opportunities came.
Mm-hmm. How about for you, Sandy?
What was the question again?
It's the altitude. It does strange things. So.
8,000 meters without oxygen, far too much.
Just the character of British climbing at the time and how open it was for you to jump in.
It's kind of the same as it always has. It's an amazing place, and you have to be quite tough and robust at first just to break into it. But I was quite lucky. I started climbing. It was, in fact, this chap, there's a chap, Mal Duff. He's passed away on it. He died on Everest a few years ago, and he's mentioned in Paul Diffley's film, Distilled, with Andy Cave. And I actually decided to go on a climbing course to start climbing. I'd done a little bit, and I thought I would really want to learn a bit more, so I enrolled in a climbing course, and it was run by this total cowboy called Mal Duff, who was he was a rough diamond and, a really nice person. He wasn't a guide or anything, but he had some really good climbers working for him in the Alps. So I went out to Chamonix for my first time, and then this Mal Duff chap kind of disappeared, but there was a really good climber, Dave Cuthbertson, who kind of took me under his arm, and we did we did some really good climbs together, Cubby and a guy called Xander McAllister, and they ended up doing like the Brenva Spur and the north face of the Drew and things in my first kind of weeks climbing, and like leading through and things. So I just kind of took to it naturally, really. But the whole culture in Britain is still really, it's really open. And of course, I remember doing one of my first routes in the Ben was a Vanishing Gully, and again it was a Chouinard Frost axe, and we were delighted when the Chouinard Zero came out because it had teeth all the way along, and it was just a fantastic ice tool. So we were climbing steep ice with those tools, and it was just the best possible thing for your climbing. And there was a whole vibe going about, and you knew if people were really good climbers because they had the old Chouinard gaiter that came all the way down and covered your boot. So if you kind of climbed grade 5, you could wear those. But if you were just a normal climber, you weren't allowed to wear them. And we all had these sort of donkey jackets, which were these sort of felt jackets with, National Coal Board written across the back. And that's what we climbed in, and it was a fantastic scene. It was wild, it was rough, but it was really, really exciting and very open and welcoming. And I remember coming down from Vanishing Gully and meeting Alex McIntyre, and he was you've already alluded to the book already, and he was an amazing guy, and he said, "Oh, you must be climbing quite well if you can do that." So I took that as a huge compliment.
Mm-hmm. People picked up on the fact that you were both pretty good at a pretty young age, and did people take you under their wings too?
Yeah, I mean, I was privileged to do a fair bit of climbing with Mick Geddes, and then I had the great break after doing Ganesh 2. Nick Kikas, with whom I climbed Ganesh 2, had an invitation to go on this Everest trip to the then unclimbed northeast ridge of Everest. Sandy was already on the team. Mal Duff was the leader. So on the strength of our Ganesh trip, I got a place on this Everest trip, and I discovered that I really could climb at above 8,000 meters, and although the trip was ultimately unsuccessful, that opened doors, and we really wanted to go back, and we decided that the ideal person to lead a return expedition was Doug Scott. So we enrolled Doug in this adventure, and he then, after that, with another unsuccessful attempt on the Northeast Ridge, but formed a lifelong friendship with Doug Scott, who then invited me on a whole succession of attempts on the last great problems, most of which remain last great problems. But that was a fantastic opportunity to climb with a man of his caliber.
Same thing for you, Sandy? Just people that kind of recognized talent and helped you along, or were you more kind of self-directed in that?
I was pretty much self-directed, and I kind of ploughed a bit of a lonely furrow for quite a long time. But I'm quite shy about life, really, and I'm not really. I suppose I'm more outgoing now than I used to be. But and then I was really lucky. We all climbed in Chamonix. There was this campsite. We all went. We didn't have any money, so we were just wild camping in a place called Snell's Field, and we all just had plastic tarpaulins, I suppose, bent over, twigs and things, branches, saplings. And we all hung out there all summer, and I met a guy, Mike Scott, who was Doug's son, and we climbed a lot together. And there was just a really good scene. There was a guy, Andy Parkin, and just was some really, really good climbers. And we all just mixed around and climbed together. And after that, through Mike Scott, I met Doug Scott, and he really took me under his arm a lot. I don't know if he really meant to. It was or I wasn't aware that he was maybe looking after me a bit, but, he really helped me a lot in my climbing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You've already mentioned the Himalaya and the draw for you, Rick. For you, Sandy, what kind of place did the Himalaya have in your mind?
Well, I love it, and I still love it, and I'm a mountain guide, and I really kind of almost don't like going there with clients, funnily enough. I try to keep it for myself a bit, but I've realized I have to make money, so I do go with clients most years. But, I still try and keep secret places for myself, and, that's really important to me. I love mountains everywhere. I'm not really, I suppose I've been drawn to the Himalayas. I always thought I'd do my Himalayan climbing first when I was still quite young, and then I'd keep my really technical, harder, really hard ice climbing and rock climbing. I'd like to become a really good rock climber, and I'm kind of trying to work on that now, although I love my food so much, I find it very difficult not to eat.
The Himalayas' inevitability for British climbers, there's such a connection of British climbing to the Himalayas. Is that kind of really the true proving ground, or has that changed a little bit?
I don't know. I mean, I think there are a lot of climbers in Britain who are really quite happy pursuing the sport in a niche in the UK. It certainly was true in Scotland. A lot of Scottish, brilliant, absolutely amazing Scottish climbers never felt the need to go beyond Scotland. What they were achieving in the Scottish Highlands, especially in winter, was quite sufficient for them, and a lot of their amazing talent never got translated into the Alps or further afield. But yeah, I got a chance when I packed up one job and decided I wanted to make my first trip to the Himalaya. I went trekking with just with one Sherpa around the Annapurna region and then up into the sanctuary, and we climbed a small peak in the Annapurna sanctuary. And that 5 weeks with one Sherpa completely hooked me on the Himalaya. I discovered the place I wanted to keep on going back to. And I formed a view over the years that I would prove. I mean, most of the big peaks had been climbed once somehow, but I formed a view that we were living through what I would term to me was like the golden age of Himalayan climbing. All the easy routes had been done. What was left were the amazing classic lines that our generation had the privilege to go for. And they are obviously diminishing as time goes on. And I've always felt privileged to live through the period of time that gave me the opportunity to go after those lines. And so I haven't really looked to go anywhere else. The Himalaya has been where I have always wanted to go back.
Mm-hmm. So not so much South America, the Andes in your resume? No, is that true for you as well?
No, I've been to Patagonia a few times, and I love it. And and my guides who have guided Aconcagua like 5 or 6 times or something. No, I like climbing everywhere. I love the Himalayas. It's great, and I'm always working. And Rick after Nanga Parbat now, Rick's saying, "Come on, let's go and do." We've got a couple of other projects that we kind of like to take off, and I'm going, "Oh, let's go and do something really technical down, in Chile or somewhere." And I'd love to go to those. I've never been to Chile at all, so I'd love to go there. And everywhere's pretty good, I think. Here.
Talk a little bit about the first time you met one another. What was there about me? And maybe it didn't happen right at the very beginning. Sometimes those chemistries take a
It
while
wasn't
to
love
sort
at
of
first sight. Or, and maybe you can see why. Rick.
Okay, we were both we were both working in the North Sea, the oil and gas industry, and we used to spend as much free time as we possibly could in Chamonix, as you've already heard, and we would post notes on the board in the Bar National. You know, shall be in Chamonix these dates, looking for climbing partner. And I kept reading these notes from one Sandy Allan, and he kept reading these notes from one Rick Allan. But we never actually met at that stage to go climbing. I think we met probably the first time at a funeral of a friend's climbing friend, and then we found ourselves on the 1985 expedition to the Northeast Ridge, which is when we really first started climbing together.
Mm-hmm. And were you partnered up on that trip as well?
Not a lot of the time, no. But it just
No, we weren't really. But that's interesting. You just reminded me about Brian Sprant. At that stage, I was doing trying to do like a lot of solos in the Alps in the winter. You know, like the Gervasuti Couloir and the Jaeger Couloir, and I was going round to climb the north face, try and solo the north face of the Matterhorn, and I met this chap Brian Sprant, and we decided when we got round to the Matterhorn, it was really black and just in really, really bad condition. But I said, oh well, let's go climb it anyway. It'll be dead easy. And these guys came with me, and I'd led the whole thing, and then it just almost at the top, and we had 2 bivouacs, and then Brian said, oh, I'll go in front, I'll lead up to the summit. And before that, he just he was untied. We were all in this really bad bivouac, and he went to go to the toilet, and he fell off, and got killed, and that was really, really sad. And that is how I met at the funeral. I've just remembered that is where we met, actually, at that funeral in Aberdeen. It was a pretty sad event, really.
Mm-hmm. When you did meet and started climbing together, whether it was Everest or just after that, what was there about each other that kind of sparked something in terms of the potential for a partnership there?
Nothing. Needs must, eh?
I mean, yeah, but Sandy's pretty easygoing, easy to get on with. Most, like 90% of the time.
About 8,000 meters he's talking about.
But then when things get really serious, Sandy gets really serious, and that's good. And it works. I don't know, it works.
It works. It definitely seems to. Yeah, we get on quite well, really.
You kind of joked yesterday about above 7,000 meters, you're best friends, and not so much so in the valley. Talk a little bit about that. What's
Well, I think many climbers, I think, are like that. We're not bosom buddies, and it's not Rick lives in Australia and I live in Scotland, and Rick's always worked for these big oil company, well, the same oil company all his life, but all over the world. And I've always been sort of Scottish based, and my whole life. I'm not saying Rick is a materialist or he likes money, but he's certainly got enough of it because he works all the time. Whereas my sort of take on it is that you just get money to go climbing, and everything else is kind of superfluous in life, really, and you don't need all that stuff. So even although, obviously one needs a little bit. But thank you, Banff Mountain Film Festival, for taking me over here. So, we're sort of living different continents and things, and we meet up whenever we can, and we are we'll send an email once a week, or maybe once a month, and it might go, "How's it going?" And I'll just get a reply, "Good." And that goes, and then we'll start talking about a trip, or we've almost always had the same idea about what's be a fantastic thing to go for, and I'll ask Rick, or Rick will ask me, and we're just the obvious choice for each other because we've done a lot together. And I think Barry Blanchard the other day was talking about just really, really close friends, and I think that's something that climbers develop. And then sometimes you either don't pass time together, or you do, and you start climbing again, or something happens and you never climb again, and that's just how it kind of works. So Rick and I have climbed a lot together, and maybe the fact that we don't communicate. Well, I think we spend so much time in snow caves or in bivouacs that we don't need to speak the rest of the time, or we'd have nothing to speak about when we were in those situations. So that kind of works as well.
One of the things that we've explored when we've had partnerships up here before is the fact that these kinds of relationships can be closer, and I think Barry mentioned that yesterday too. They can be closer than you have with anybody else in your life. Is that true for the two of you?
It's close. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we know most of the time we know what one another's thinking. There's one famous occasion on Pumori when I was messing about somewhere, a few tens of meters away, having led a pitch, and Sandy screams at me, "Communicate!" Like it wasn't at all clear what I was trying to achieve. But most of the time we really do understand one another without a whole heap of conversation, and that, yeah, I mean that it's a sign that we're fairly well aligned, and yes, it's endured. Our relationship has endured longer than his marriage or mine.
And speaking of marriage, I understand that Rick asked you to be his best man at one of his weddings, at his wedding?
Yeah, Rick's only had one wedding so far. And he did ask me, but I was really busy, and I said, yeah, I'd love to do it, but I just don't know where I'll be at the time, because you don't, as a client, you just don't know. And we're mountain guides, and I'm a mountain guide, so, we have to go where the work is quite often, or, we try, especially when you're younger and you're not established. So, I'm still quite young in that respect. So, you always, sometimes you'll get a call to go somewhere that's really interesting and you'd really want to go. So I wouldn't commit too much. And then it turned out he had two best mans, but I actually was at his wedding, but I stepped aside and let the other chap do the honours.
Either of you, when do you think you first got the true measure of this partner of yours? What was the occasion when you just kind of realized, this is who this person is, and this is how that's going to help me or serve me in climbing?
For me, it's never been like that. Like, it's just been somebody loyal you can trust, and when there's zero no communication, you're climbing a hard pitch, and it's like white out and spin drift, and there's no communication really, but it's totally reliable, and when things happen, the rope comes in, it goes loose at the right time. That's really what it's about for me. So it's not about using each other or exploiting each other. It's just having this fantastic trust in somebody that they're doing it right. And I think that came really clear on Will Gadd's film last night, which was really, the B-layers and everybody, they were working as a really solid team. And, that's what gets you success, I think.
No, I mean, I quite agree. I mean, we just get to the end of a trip and we get to the airport and we look at one another and say, gosh, we got away with it again.
But there are things about you that complement each other too? There are differences in you that make you a good partnership?
Yeah, I don't mind Rick bailing me out on trips, I suppose, financially. Yeah, no, we get... It's difficult to say, really. I think we've both got complementary strengths, or strengths that complement each other, and I'm just trying to wonder what these are, but they do exist, and I'm just looking for the word.
One way of putting it is often I'm the one with too much push. I'm the one who gets us to the top, and then I'm burned out, and Sandy gets us off the mountain. That's happened a couple of times. If I'm ready to admit it.
Yeah, I suppose so. Like we share leads, and technically we're probably climbing about the same pretty dreadful standard for these days. But, it works in the mountains, and we can do it when there's not, we can do it when, the chips are down, I suppose, and everything's in really bad condition. We can still climb the same standard all the time. I suppose that's what guides become quite good at. And, we can rely on each other, and we do. Rick is very, very pushy sometimes, and I've got to go kind of... But I can be incredibly pushy too, but, that's just... But I've kind of got maybe a better slide. I think as a mountain guide, you develop a sort of sliding scale to risk. And when you're guiding, you kind of pull it back a bit. And then when you're doing your own climbing, you kind of push it up a bit more. And then if you're climbing with somebody that you can really trust and one of your best friends, you can really go... You can push that scale maybe a little bit closer to risky, but you're still, being really, really safe all the time. Like, I wouldn't say we pushed the boat out too much in Nanga Parbat, but I think everything we did was sort of logical and sensible, and we had it kind of worked out until we ran out of food and everything. But that was, but we weren't needing it by that stage.
Let's talk about the Mazeno for a while then. if you think about that particular route, I mentioned the line you gave me yesterday, Rick, about liking that kind of route that's of the kind of scale that you can even see from space. What's the aura of the Mazeno for you? Why go back again first, second, third time?
I suppose my first exposure to the Mazeno was with Doug Scott, and that was his third attempt on it. Third. And I ended up with, Doug had to go home, Sandy had to go home, and I ended up on the ridge with Wojtek Kurtka and Andrew Locke, great Australian climber. And we got about a third of the way along the ridge, and the clouds started to close in, and the weather was really uncertain, and we were totally intimidated by this thing. And we came to the consensus view that we were going to turn around at that point. We didn't have enough confidence in going forward. And I took this photograph looking forward along the ridge, and it just captured the essence of the whole thing. It looks so preposterous, and yet you can almost believe that you can do it. And I lived with this photograph for 17 years, wondering whether we would get it together. And of course, as time went on, we talked about it more. We went back. We climbed the Daimyo face. We saw it from other angles, and the whole thing started to become more credible to go back. But it's one of after that first attempt back in '95. It stayed with me as an iconic route and captured perfectly in this one picture.
Same for you, Sandy? Kind of a sense of the preposterous possibility?
Yeah, the first time we went on it was 95, wasn't it? It was in 1995. And it was we realized it was a monstrous undertaking, and we had climbed 8,000 meter peaks and trying new routes, like we'd been on the inclined ridge of it, the east-northeast ridge of Everest a few times, and done other really hard and then really technical climbs as well. And then for me, that we sort of christened Rick's photo the point of no return, because we knew if we abseiled down there, you'd probably never get out. And then it was amazing because a guy, Steve Swanson, who's here, and Doug Shabo, all of a sudden it was announced that they got through to the Mazeno Gap. And for me, that was, wow, these guys are incredible. And I still think they are incredible. And I follow sort of Canadian, North American climbing a lot. I'm really interested in what goes on over here. I just think it's an amazing place, and you've got amazing, amazing climbers. And that really inspired me. And then a few years later, Tue and Rick and I we've got to go back. Got to go back, and I kept going. And Rick would say, "Come on, Sandy, let's go."
And I said, "I'm not." Before somebody else does it, is that?
No, we just wanted to go. No, there's not that competitive nature. It's a really good project, and it'd be really nice to do it sometime. And it's always nice to do it first, but that actually is not really the motivation. Not for me. It's more like Rick earlier said. It was, he saw that climb and it was totally inspiring. But terrorizing at the same time. I kind of more look at like it's this, when you're 19 years old, or for a man, we're about 19 or 20 by the time you're kind of even semi-mature, and you see this most beautiful woman, and you think, wow. And that's how Himalayan, like a big ridge or something, that's how it affects me. I think, oh, that would be totally impossible. Especially for an ugly guy like me. And then you just... you watch a mountain, you watch a history, you get to know it, and then maybe with a bit of luck, you'll be able to live with it for a while, or it might let you live with, or it might let, or the mountain lets us live with it. Maybe, it puts up with us for a little while, so we can do what we can enjoy ourselves. Yeah. Really, and that, for me, it's a bit more like that. It's not really a savage. It's not like we're going to war. Like I hate when people say, "Oh yeah, I filled my rucksack with 10 days food and it was heavy." Of course it's going to be heavy, and you volunteer to do it, so you're going climbing because you love climbing. So, and that's one of the big debates I have with kind of modern climbing in a way, what's going on. But anyway, that's a different story maybe. But like we're there because we love to be there and we want to be there, and just find it totally inspiring. And the Mazeno Ridge is one of these objectives, which was just really, really interesting. And then the two Americans that I mentioned earlier, got Swenson and Szabo, got through it. It really, really impressed me. And then a few years later, the two German guys were supremely well acclimatized, got through. But the thing that happened, they all were a little bit ill, or some, things were just, it was just too much, and they had to descend. And Rick kept saying to me, Sandy, we've got to go back, we've got to go back. And I kept going, I'm not going until we have a proper plan. I know we can now, thanks to the previous people, we can get to that Mazeno Gap, but we'll just get exhausted and we'll be hitting our head against a brick wall. And I think that's maybe...
the climb's not done unless you go all the way to the summit to getting to the...
Well, I'm not that... I kind of think these days that's a little bit superficial maybe, because I have climbed routes on Latok, and we didn't quite get to the summit, but we dug Scott. And we actually, eventually, we were going to abseil off early, and we actually climbed to the summit and then abseiled off. But I think it's nice to finish something on a point, I guess. But, I don't think that's really, it's not really what it's about. But what was, I've lost my train of thought there. I wanted to have a proper plan. And I think that's what Rick and I bring to each other. Rick's this really pushy guy. Let's go and knock our head against a brick wall and see how we get on. And I'll go, wait a minute, Rick, we know that there's 4 people in the world, amazing climbers who've managed to climb to the Mazeno Gap. Let's come up with a plan that maybe we can get further than the Mazeno Gap. That's where we kind of complement each other.
So what does a proper plan look like for something of that scale? What did you eventually end up doing?
Well, three things significantly were different 17 years on. One was that it was very, very uncommon in '95 to get good long-range Himalayan weather forecasts for what was going to happen at 7,000 meters, let alone real time. We had, thanks to Kathy's contacts from her home, we had access to some weather forecasts coming through to us on a sat phone. So that's put on a route that where you know that you're going to be there for more than a week, possibly 2 weeks. Heaven help you if it's going to be longer than that. That makes a huge difference to the risk calculation in the Himalaya. Secondly, we managed to put together an extraordinarily strong team, bringing together ourselves, Kathy, and Sherpas climbing with us.
Now, we haven't mentioned Kathy O'Dowd yet. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about who she was. This is the fabled South African woman who was on the mountain.
Yes.
Well, Kathy's pretty amazing, actually. Her name's Kathy O'Dowd. She was born in South Africa. She now lives in Andorra, but she was the first woman ever to climb Everest from both sides, from the Nepali side and then from the Tibet side. So that's, it's quite something. Albeit those were on fixed rope expeditions, but she started climbing. She had no idea about climbing at all. She met this guy, Ian Waddell. Eventually they got married, and they were doing these sort of climbs. And that's, it's really, really amazing. That was back, I don't know exactly when she climbed Everest and things. Do you, Rick? And then Kathy does a bit of ski touring, and she's also quite a handy rock climber. And she hates really ice climbing, but I've guided her a few times just ice climbing, but she really doesn't like it. And I climbed with her. One time I was trying to solo Lhotse. I've had a plan for a long time. I've always wanted to climb that middle Lhotse. It used to be the highest unclimbed peak in the world until the Russians did it. But I've always had a real dream that's one of the things I really wanted to tick off. And hopefully by the south face of Lhotse and, doing a traverse and things. I really was keen on that, and I was very interested in what the Polish climbers were doing at that time. And I was up soloing Lhotse, and I got really high on it, and I came back down thinking the snow was really deep, and I was a bit early in the season. Everybody was working on just the normal path in Everest, the sort of tourist route in Everest. And I came down and I was really depressed. I thought, I'm going to have to go home. I'm not going to be able to do this thing. There's just too much snow. And who did I meet but Kathy O'Dowd, and who had a Sherpa? And she said, I'm going to climb it, but I'm waiting for a while until they put in a track and all that, because that's the style of climbing that they're kind of used to. And I thought, I suppose I could hang out, and we sort of got together and we climbed Lhotse together. And we didn't actually climb Lhotse. We climbed the west summit And now they're saying that I probably did the first ascent of the West Summit, but I don't actually believe that, because there's this guy, Tom O'Sesson, who a lot of people in the audience might know, and he may well have done it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has. And especially now, if you compare all his timings to what Uli Steck and co are doing there, it's possible that he actually did climb Lhotse West. But anyway, to cut a long story short, Kathy and I got on really well, and we started just climbing a bit together. And then we kind of just lost touch a bit. She got married and, had a nice relationship and all that. And years passed, and Rick and I were about to go to Nanga Parbat for the Mazeno Ridge, and all of a sudden I phoned Rick up saying, Rick, I really can't go, I just don't have the money to go. And Rick said, well, I can't really bail it out any more than he already had done. And but he mentioned, Kathy, she spoke to Kathy O'Dowd the other day, and I got on the phone I sent her an email, just, hey, Kathy, I've got a project. I was sorry to hear about your divorce, but I've got this wonderful project that might interest you. You might be a bit sad about life and things. Thinking I'll give her something to cheer her up, And I should say I've got a girlfriend and things, and there was none of that sort of stuff going on, just to clarify the situation a little bit. And she wrote back, what is it, Sandy? And I said, it's something you're really not interested in. And then I got another email, what is it, Sandy? And I said, well, it's a Mazeno Ridge and Nanga Parbat. And she replied, wow. And then I phoned, and she gave her phone number in Andorra. I phoned her up, and I said, well, to be quite honest, we're asking you because we really need some money. And she's really attractive. She does a lot of motivational speaking and things, and she's a really good climber, and she's actually really, really strong. So please don't think it was just about money or the fact that she's attractive, because she is actually a really, really good climber. And I can see why people might think that, I think she's attractive and everything.
But she had connection to sponsors,
But
She
had
has
great
fantastic connections to sponsors, and she decided to come. The whole problem with that was that she said herself, Sandy, I can't climb this route, but I'd love to come with you guys, and if I even manage to get halfway along the ridge or a quarter way, or even to where the Mazeno Ridge really starts, then she'd be delighted. And I said, well, that's cool, but the only thing is Rick and I are totally focused, and we really don't want to come down. If we go up, we're not going to come back down for just a silly reason, like somebody's tired. Like if somebody broke a leg or, something, we might consider coming down. And the plan was originally, I've got these really two good Sherpa friends. I'm a guide, so I'm guiding all the time. Lakpa Rangdu and Lakpa Zarok, and we climb a lot together in Nepal. Well, they work for me as guiding Ahmedablam and Burinse, and I've known Lakpa Rangdu for a long time. And I've always said, and they're really good ice climbers in their own right. I've seen them climb some amazing ice in Nepal. And they go climbing and they go bouldering, and they're just good mates, And I had already asked some Western climbers to come with us in the Mazeno, but they all, in the UK, and they all just thought it was a crazy idea and they wouldn't commit. And one guy who I really wanted to come, his wife was just having a baby, so the timing was really bad for him, so he couldn't come. So I decided we'd ask the Sherpas to come. And we had to pay, we flew them over. We give them a slight wage, I think, but not very much. And they came as climbers. And so originally there was just two, and Rick and I were going to climb as a team, and the two Sherpas climb in the team. And my theory at that time was that'll be fantastic. That means we can carry more food. We should be able to get to the Mazeno Gap where Shabo and Swenson got to. And then with a bit of luck, we'll have enough food that somebody of the, probably the Sherpas is what I actually thought, we'd have the energy left to go to the summit, and Rick and I would head down the shell route.
So,
and
sorry,
then, of course,
Sandy, so Rick, you were saying this was building the team, and the Sherpas and Kathy were the additional parts of this strong team that you were building.
That's what gave us an incredibly strong team, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there was a third comment in there
The third
as well?
element was the fact that in 2009, we had gone with a great friend, Gerfried Gerschel, who unfortunately died on Gashbrum 1 just a couple of years ago. We went to the Daimir side, and we climbed the Daimir face of Nanga Parbat with a group of his Austrian friends. So we knew the route, we knew the way off. So that was a huge, huge psychological advantage. We knew that if we made it to the summit, we had a viable way off, because you get to a point, at some point along the Mazeno, arguably at some point along the Mazeno Ridge, you get to a point of no return where there is so much energy required and to reverse what you've done.
And you can't go down the sides.
And you effectively can't go down the sides. You either have to go down the shell route, which is the way Steve had retreated, or you have to go all the way over the top and go down the Diomede side. And now we knew, that we had enough confidence that we could find our way down the Diomede side. So we had these three factors. We had weather forecast, we had a strong team, and we knew our way off. That really set us up to where I think both of us had the confidence to really go for it.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that equipment manufacturers have played a huge role in equipment now, design and the materials that we all wear. It's just so much easier. And the gas stoves, MSR and co, they're making such fantastic lightweight and very efficient burners on the stoves now, so you need a lot less gas and that sort of thing. It's really, really, it's made it a lot more possible. So I don't think we can, technology's been really important, fabric technology, etc.
We saw in the slideshow at the beginning some kind of sense of what the traverse itself is like, but you can give us a little snapshot of what the character of climbing is on the traverse. Quite technical in places?
Technical in places. A lot of it's pretty boring, and at first you can just scoot along it. It's just sort of wheelback ridges and things.
Yeah, I mean it's really varied. There's everything. There's the whalebacks, snow. There's the snow ice, almost flutings. Very, very narrow corniced ridges where you're very delicately stepping around these cornices, and then rock pinnacles with bottomless snow at the bottom. So really, really tricky to get around. Some abseils that take you down into deep clefts, then you have to climb out of them again. And not always somewhere to bivouac. We had one occasion along the ridge we couldn't find anywhere to put 3 tents.
And you didn't have great conditions that year either, in terms of there was quite a bit of deep snow.
Well, we weren't early in the season, but we were at the normal sort of time that most people go, and we found that when we climbed Nanga Parbat in 2009, it was a really good weather period, that June-July period, and quite settled. So I think everybody knows you don't really get long periods of good weather in Nanga Parbat, but they seemed to work well for us.
Mm-hmm. But still quite a bit longer than you expected in terms of the amount of time that it took you to get over to the gap.
Yeah, we moved more slowly than we expected. Yes.
But at the same time, we were kind of deliberately moving slowly because we wanted to preserve our energy. So we decided, I suppose my plan, I was the leader of the expedition, I suppose I did have this quite pragmatic plan that we were in for the long haul. We were going to look after our bodies as much as possible. Rather than give huge days and get exhausted, we were going to try and stop at a reasonable place, put up make a nice platform and try and get the bivvy tents up and have lots of food and look after our bodies. So when we got to our long-term plan wasn't to get to the Mazeno Gap, it was to get to the summit, and we knew we had to look after our bodies. So consequently, we weren't climbing we were trying not. We did climb some really long days, but in general, we tried to plan it so that we were getting proper rest, as far as is reasonably practical at 7,000 odd meters all the time.
What role do you think age and experience played in the way that this climb played out?
Well, we were lucky still to be so young, that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, the point Sandy just made about taking it fairly steadily and not blasting along the ridge. I think that was partly a bit of experience coming through. Just not trying to push it right out every day to the setting sun before we bivouacked. That was probably the voice of experience. Let's not burn ourselves out here. This is not a sprint. And later, when the big decision came at the Mazeno Gap, again, that was just all of our 29 years climbing together. Just kind of got us to the point where we could make a decision to go back on the second summit bid.
One of the things you said yesterday that was intriguing was the idea that with age comes kind of a control of emotions that puts you in perhaps a privileged position relative to, in this particular case, the Sherpas particularly, but perhaps even Kathy.
Yeah, I think so. I think, Carnegie it was, wasn't it, who said, a man who can control his emotion can control most things. I think it was Carnegie who said that a long time ago. I think, one has to control one's emotions, and that's really, on a big route like that, or, in any climb, you've got to go, God, this is terrifying me. You've just got to sort of stop and breathe. It's a bit like, like I'm a father, I've got 2 children. And I remember my kids would be just screaming and screaming, and you'd take them in your hand and you'd take deep breaths and you'd go, and they'd settle down for you, and I think that's what we, as climbers, we do that to ourselves all the time. When we're climbing on a rock move or a technical move and your axe pops out or whatever, you go, stay cool and you can do this. And I think that sort of emotional control is good. And then, of course, when you run out of food and, you've already been at altitude for, 7,000, almost 7,000, above 7,000 meters or that sort of height for 11 days, I think some people's emotions can, it's quite natural to want to go down, I think.
I find it quite easy to focus and block a lot of stuff out and just focus on what I'm about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the description he gave yesterday of you have this incredible ability to focus, but you don't do empathy so much.
Yeah, it was me who said the empathy bit. Yeah, I know how that feels, yeah. But he expects others to be...
Of course.
Yeah.
You mentioned the decision that had to get made at the Gap, Rick, so could we just talk a little bit about that? This was a momentous kind of decision of, do you go to the top? Does somebody go down? Who goes up?
Well, we got to the Gap and we thought we're in with a really, really good chance here. We've got to where we need to be. Everybody's alive and well. Everybody's up for the summit, and we went for it the next day, basically.
Yeah, that really annoyed me, actually. I was wanting to have a day off at the Mazeno Gap because I was convinced we should rest. It was a very windy forecast as well, and I was just convinced we should actually take a break for a day. Not for a week, but for a day. But we had no food. So the Sherpas and Rick and Kathy...
no food.
Almost out. We knew we had a sort of one meal left, and before that we were on really quite tight... We wouldn't say we were controlling the rations, but we were being quite careful with our food. But these guys really, I was the expedition leader per se, but in an alpine style trip these days we don't really have a leader, but for all intents and purposes I was a leader, but these guys really pushed to keep going.
So we went on.
Was a mistake.
We went on and we got really high, but we didn't make it. It was late. I mean, I would have carried on, but the Sherpas had got to a point where they convinced themselves that we didn't stand a chance of summiting and getting back in the light, and that's kind of the way they climb, the way they're used to climbing, and they wanted to turn around, and Kathy had turned around, and reluctantly I agreed to turn around as well. So.
You would have made it that day, do you think?
I think
we wouldn't be alive if we did.
I think I would have likely reached the summit and not come down. So reluctantly, but we made the right decision to retreat.
We got to just about almost 8,000 meters, and just there's this really big wall, and the shell route climbs through that wall, and there's if anybody's looking for a good line, there's loads up there, but it's a long way to get to the bottom. It's a big walk-in to get to it, but there's some really good climbing up there, just like superb climbing. And Rick and I I was really fired up, so Rick, I can climb that, let's just go. And then the Sherpas were adamant, they were wanting to go down. There was just the 2 Sherpas, they were on one rope, Rangdu and Lakpa, and there was Rick and I was saying, Rick, we can climb this, let's just, we were really close to just, bolting it. And that's where we were kind of maybe too young. So we decided, and the Sherpas were a bit despondent, no, we've got to go down. So we actually decided to retreat, which was very sensible, I suppose.
So at that point, we're back at the Mazeno Gap. We've got scraps of food left. We got 2 or 3 gas cylinders, and everybody's kind of resigned to going down. We're going to descend the shell route, and we go to sleep.
It was pretty People were really despondent, right? Like I remember kicking about trying to tidy the ropes and stuff outside. It was, just coming dark. Everybody was the Sherpas were in their tent. They wouldn't even really speak to us much. Kathy, I was sharing a tent with Kathy. She was just totally out of it and totally adamant. They were all totally adamant they were going to go down. And just to keep the peace, really, and just to not upset the apple cart, because it was all very sensitive, we just said, yeah, well, we'll probably go down with you, but kind of I don't suppose we said let's sleep in it. We just kind of, everybody just retired for the night, as it were.
Yeah. I was sharing a tent with Lakpan Rangdu. And then we start to stir in the morning, and Sandy shouts over to me from his tent, "Hey, when you've had breakfast, come over. Let's talk about our options." And I'm thinking, we have options? Sandy's mind has clearly been working overnight, and suddenly we have options.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure what we really wanted to do, but what I knew I didn't want to do was rush a decision. Mm-hmm. And the others had kind of totally lost hope, I'd say, at that point. So I knew that they had to go down. And of course, I was expedition leader. I'm a mountain guide. You're feeling like, my responsibility was quite tangible. You just thought, if I let these guys go down there by themselves and they die, people will say, Sandy, you're the most horrible person in the world. Mm-hmm. And maybe I am the most horrible person in the world, but even although I didn't want that to happen, but I didn't want them to get hurt anyway.
But I love the phrase that you used of, we were 2 teams of consenting adults, so they can make their own decision.
That was Rick's term. But yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was very much the situation. Everybody knew. Even before we came, we discussed it, either the Sherpas would go on. We did expect Kathy to have to go down with a Sherpa. So we had anticipated this happening at some point. So, and we did have one, we had a really, really good attempt at the summit the previous day. And on 8,000 metre peaks, you don't usually, go really high and on an alpine-style expedition. And then come down and then think, let's go back up the next day. That doesn't normally happen.
Especially after 11 days.
Yeah, that's 12 by that time, yeah. So, yeah.
But I mean, the strength of the party, Kathy figured out very early on that between the 6 of us, we'd climbed Everest 29 times. That was a measure of the depth of experience on that team.
Or how boring we must have been.
But that's like 9/10 of those, of course, ascents belong to the Sherpas, not to us.
That's a good number. So you make the decision to go up. A big part of that, though, was also the decision for some people to go down, and there's one particularly telling part of that decision, which is sending the only functioning lighter in the group down with the.
No, that's not quite right. They took a lighter down, and we still had a functioning lighter at that point.
At that point.
At that point, we still have a functioning lighter. Yep, and we did have. They were great. They said, look, here's some food. Take this. You're going to need it more than we will. So we had kind of 3/4 empty biscuit packets and a few tea bags and some scraps to keep us going for what we thought was going to be a summit at most. We still hadn't decided if we were really definitely going for it, but then it was it was going to be a summit push, and then at most a day and a half coming off down the Diomede side, because we were confident that we could descend the Diomede side in probably a day and a half.
Yeah, normally the Diomede is normally fixed most of the way, and there's tourist groups going up and down. So it's become like Everest and stuff on that side. It's more technical probably because of the Kingshofer Wall, but basically there's always a track of people going up and down it in the season. So
except.
So and in 2009, I got from the summit down to Camp 4 and then 4 all the way to base camp in a day. So part of the equation was, well, we've got a day to the summit. We'd probably get down to Camp 4 that night, and then another day, and we'd be out of there,
Except it didn't
It
quite
didn't
work out
quite work
there,
like
right?
that.
Yeah. How many days back to base?
It took us 4 days to get off the mountain after summiting.
Yeah, there was nobody on the mountain. We thought there was, because when we arrived at the Mazeno, on the Mazeno Ridge for the first time, 12, 13 days previously, we could see down to base camp, the Daimir side, and there were a lot of tents there. But in the time that we went round to do the Mazeno, almost everybody had abandoned their expeditions in the Daimir phase because there was, it was a really, really heavy snow.
And stripped the lines as well?
Well, they hadn't got anywhere. They hadn't got anywhere. Nobody had climbed the mountain in 18 months. And so there was no fixture up at all on the Daimir side that was visible. Some of it obviously was iced in from previous years, but that no one had fixed any rope at all.
Mm-hmm. So what happens in your heads when you realize that's the case?
You think, great, we've got it to ourselves, really. And then you go, oh, we've got no food and we've got no stove and we've got, it'd be nice to crawl into somebody's tent and steal their gas and have a drink and eat all their food, especially if they're American climbers and they've got lots of M&Ms and things. But, that wasn't the case. That was disappointing that there was no M&Ms.
Because that would have been the only food you would have had for the descent if you had some
Fig Newtons too. They're always good.
Yeah, we were completely out of food at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And at some point, the lighter stopped working.
And
as well.
then, we got back from the summit, and got to have a brew, and the lighter breaks, and that's the only lighter we have. And
that just shows how experienced we are.
That's the depth of experience. And you wouldn't believe how many hours we spent trying to make the parts of a lighter do something that would ignite a gas stove, but didn't happen.
I did have some storm matches with me.
Oh yeah.
Really those really powerful storm matches that will light in anything. But on the summit, we were taking photos and everything. But we've not really spoken about the summit because the summit's a pretty cool story. But on the summit, we were taking all these the weather got just amazingly good and we just couldn't believe how lucky we were. And I could even set my camera on a rock and take photos of us both.
This was 6 o'clock at night.
It's 10 past 6 or 12 minutes past 6, depending whose watch you had. And I pulled my handkerchief out of my pocket. Being an English, British gentleman, we always have a handkerchief. And to blow my nose or whatever, and all these matches came out and the box, but it was all damp and broken. It'd been in this snotty handkerchief pocket for a week. You can imagine it was pretty messy. And I remember seeing a bit of the box, the little emery side, blowing about, and thought I should really pick that up. It's just not environmentally friendly. I wasn't thinking, we might need it. I just thought I should really pick that up, and I did start picking up some of the matches and stick them back in my pocket. But then the emery paper thing had blown away, and that was it. And then, a few days later, we went to light the stove. And, of course, these matches, they just, you need the proper material to light them. They just don't light on stones or anything. So I was really quite annoyed at myself for that. And in the Cairngorms, we do lots of snow caving back in Scotland. And, all these old guys, that I call them the old guys, they're all really organised and they're really good at survival. And they've got these little kits that they have with all their snow caving gear. And the wise people, they've got a little aluminium sort of case that goes over their matchbox, and it's got a really good striker on it. And I've always laughed at those guys. But I bet they're all laughing at me now.
I want to get to the summit in a few minutes, but there's another element to this story that we've never really talked about up here on the stage, and don't hear climbers talk about it that often, and that's the role of faith for both of you, the presence of God and the role of faith for both of you.
Yeah, I'm a committed Christian. It's kind of basic for me, so it's important.
Is God present in the mountains more than it is other places in the way that people have talked about it, this sublime presence of God there? No?
my personal view, no. I mean, I think God's accessible to us wherever we are. I think in the mountains we're just more aware of the glory of the environment we're in, and we're more open to perhaps to be aware of these things. But we can be open anyway.
So not closer to him or her there. No, that's okay. Does prayer play a role in the climbs that you do then? Is it something that answers questions for you or solves problems for you?
When it gets tough, well, definitely. Lord, get me out of here. At that point, yes.
Yeah, not quite a Star Trek moment. But I remember once coming down Nanga Parbat and, we had a lot of really just these whiteout conditions. And in Scotland, we're used to that, but it was still really bad and we just couldn't find a way. I remember once praying and, it all cleared. And a few hours later, I said to Rick, well, I actually prayed there. And, for me to admit that was quite, I don't really do that sort of thing. And then, a day later, we also got in on a very sharp ridge, we got into this really bad whiteout and we just didn't know which way to go. And Rick wanted to go left and I knew it was wrong, but I wasn't convinced that I was correct because I was having some hallucinations and all that sort of stuff. I was really quite out of it, but Rick thought I was being really strong, so I didn't want to tell him about the hallucinations and stuff. So, and I said, well, we should just bivvy right here. That was our last bivouac high, just above Camp 2, about 6'4" or something. And I prayed, Lord, give us some good weather so that we can just get out of here. And of course, it didn't work. And I felt really good. I was brought up free church, free Presbyterian in Scotland, going to church 3 times a day on a Sunday with all my brothers and my sisters. And, it was just horrendous. But, and I remember feeling so guilty for kind of bargaining with God. I just, it really kind of came home at me, in a big way. I felt really guilty for doing that, and I thought, Serge, you're right, you're not going to get off this one.
Is there any
in a very serious note, really?
Yeah. Is there any kind of fatalistic risk of faith up high that you start thinking that things are preordained in any kind of way that you need to be concerned about? Is it concerning with each other that you think that you're turning to something else other than just feet on the ground and good common sense thinking?
I mean, Sandy thinks I'm a bit fatalist.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's fatalistic. In my case, I think it's a win-win. You can't really go wrong because we've got great lives as it is, and if there's anything more, then God, we're just laughing our heads off. I think so. I don't actually see it as fate. Something to worry about too much.
So not so much of a if this is my time kind of thing.
No. But I mean, when you walk under a tottering, we have to crash under some tottering serac. A little bit of fatalism helps. It's a kind of binary outcome. It's either you're going to get there or you're not. And if you want to get to the other side, you've just got to go. And I can live with that.
Well, I think if you're an organised climber, Will Gadd touched on it last night. You actually do look at all the negatives and all the things that can go wrong, and then you try and prepare yourself as much as possible. And you shouldn't be just a total optimist. Expect things to go wrong, and then chances are if you actually pre-planned it, it might not go wrong. But if you haven't included it in your equation, then it's going to trip you up.
Yeah,
so I think that's important.
For those of you who were there last night, Will was talking about the positive power of negative thinking, which was about risk assessment, and which was just really good, really good.
Mm-hmm. You said there's a summit story.
Yeah, well, we got to the summit. Like Rick and I, we left our high camp where the Sherpas and Kathy went down. That was 7,200 meters. And then we decided to take this, what I call a wimp out line, because it's not the line that I wanted to take. And we sort of traversed, it's still quite semi-technical, but not really that, not very hard. And we kind of traversed around and then joined the normal route high up, the normal Diamere route, the Diamere face route high up. And we didn't make the summit that day, and we had to bivouac again, which wasn't part of our plan. And we didn't have a shovel, and we had to dig our snow cave with just the adze of the ice axes, and that took a few hours. Then the next day we got up early, got to the summit at 2:00 in the afternoon. But we were so close to the summit, but it wasn't the summit. It was standing on this pinnacle thing, and just said, this is so close. And it was white, kind of white. It was really, really misty, and just couldn't see a thing. And on the summit of Nanga Parbat, there's a wire and a peg and an old piece of a T-bar, sort of snow stake type instrument lying on the, and we just couldn't find it. And we actually started coming down, and we traversed right around this big sort of ridge where all the different summits are. And eventually I got to the stage where Rick, just take some photos and let's get out of here. This is just silly. Who needs a summit anyway? And we were actually walking back up towards where we thought the summit was. And all of a sudden, at about 5 o'clock at night, so we got up there at 2 o'clock, so we'd sort of just traversed around at 8,000 meters for a long time. At 5 o'clock at night, it started just this little lightning coming in the atmosphere. And then it just, to try and find the energy to go back up was really, really difficult because we were really, really tired. And out of somewhere, Rick found the energy to just break that last 100 meters up to the summit again. And, you know, the tracks were really close to where our tracks were at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we got there at 6:10 at night.
And it cleared. I mean, and we recognised the summit from 3 years earlier. So, yeah.
If you hadn't gone back up and found the true summit, what would the conversation be that we'd be having right now? Would you be disappointed in that? Would it matter in retrospect now?
Well, I remember when I climbed the Lhotse West. I climbed Lhotse West and the weather got really, really bad, so I didn't bother going to the main summit because on Lhotse West there was lots of prayer flags and things. And then I came back to Kathmandu and we always get interviewed by Liz Hawley, this amazing lady. I don't know if she's been here, but she's just amazing. And I was saying to Liz, yeah, well, we sort of climbed Lhotse, but really we just did climb Lhotse West because I'm just very honest about what I do. Well, I don't see any reason to be otherwise, really. So I just speak about how life is. And, oh, it doesn't count then, she said. And I said, well, it might not count to you, Liz, but it counts. It was a really good climb, and it counts to me. So, you know, I don't know. Yeah, it's nice that of course it was. You know, it's really, like for us, we wanted to reach the summit because we knew that there's all these armchair mountaineers who don't really climb much who would doubt us if we didn't get the summit. Whereas real climbers wouldn't actually, you know, worry so much about that sort of thing.
And we're coming to a close here. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the aftermath of this. One of which was recognition by the climbing community of giving you the PLA door. What were your thoughts about that? How, given that you haven't really been publicizing a lot about what you've been doing in the past, whether by accident or intent, and suddenly you're getting quite a bit of recognition for what you're doing. How do you respond to that?
I loved it. Fantastic. But the good part was, I mean, there were 6. We were nominated along with 5 other teams for the PLA d'Or award in Chamonix and Courmayeur, and it just so happened that a lot of people had done some amazing things in 2012, and the judges decided to award all of us a PLA d'Or. So all 6 teams who were nominated in 2012 won the PLA d'Or. So what was good about it from our point of view was, yes, we were getting recognition from our peers, like you've done a fantastic route, guys, but also we were being recognized along with the French, the Russians, the Americans, the other British team and the Japanese team, that we'd all done amazing routes. So it was like a giant party. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. What did Wojtek Kurtyka say about accepting that award? Yeah,
well, I'm good friends with Voy, and I was phoning him saying, I don't think I can take it, Voy. And he was saying, yeah, well, you probably shouldn't. And I said, well, and I was agreeing with him, and you know, it was a really big thing for me. And I said, Wojtek, I'm going to dedicate it to you if I take it. And he says, Sandy, if you do that, I'll be so mad at you. And I decided I'd go, and even when I went, I just thought, I'm not really so cool with the whole idea of awards for mountaineering. But in actual fact, now I've got it, and it's sitting on the shelf at home gathering dust. I just think, yeah, well, it's cool to have that there. I'm kind of embarrassed at the same time, but it's really, I think it's cool, actually. It's good, and the French do it really, the French and the Italians, they organise it really well, and I think it's cool that that we do have something that acknowledges that. I think getting it from your peers, and it's the who runs the PGHM? What's their initial? It's the
French Alpine Club.
It's basically the French, and Yeah, it's a super thing, and I think it's good that they acknowledge something like the PLA door. Whether we all want to go about having medals for climbing is a totally different situation. And I don't really see it like that.
Does it change anything for you or compromise anything for you if you think about some of the pressures of this success in the future?
Well, we're all climbers. Nobody cares. Like, do we care? I don't think people really care about that sort of thing. I really don't think it matters too much. And in the climbing community, it doesn't really. And okay, say I wanted to be sponsored by the maker of this shirt. It might make a difference. But even, I think actually, the owners of big companies, they're actually really very sensitive to all that. And I think it's good to get sponsorship, and but there's a really nice balance at the moment, and I think maybe it should keep that way. But I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I love what you said yesterday, Sandy, about those kinds of things can make your obligations and your thinking kind of get tangled up a little bit if you don't play it out right.
That's one of the reasons I always try to keep my head a bit below. I'm not very good, but I try and keep my head below the below the parapet of the bridge, as it were, because I know that the minute you stick it up, there's somebody wanting to knock it off, or it tends to be that way in mountaineering these days. But also, I'm always really worried about the pressures that sponsorship how it could affect your decision making when you're really high up in a sort of in an awkward situation. You might decide to press on, and I think there are examples of mountaineers or in mountaineering of people who have been sponsored a lot and then have maybe made the wrong decision to try and satisfy their perceived perception of what the sponsor wants. I'm not saying the sponsors are driving people to that, but I think the person who takes that money or that sponsorship then feels that they owe something to the company, and therefore they might, it might influence your decision.
Mm-hmm. But as you're saying, maybe that's matured a bit now, and the sponsors themselves have got different understandings of.
I think it's pitched quite. I was just a few days ago. I was doing a safety event for a company who makes drinks, and we had athletes, so-called athletes, climbing chalk cliffs in the Isle of Wight, and it was a great event. And I was really impressed because at one point some of the athletes said, "Hey, you safety guys, can we stop the competition? You guys go down there and drill the chalk so we can get our ice tools in properly and easier." And we actually, the safety team, is guy Scott Muir, who's athlete for this company. It's called. I won't say what it's called. Man the fuck up drink, it's called, and it's so you drink that and you really feel very positive. It's really good, And anyway, Scott and I discussed it, and we went to the man the fuck up drink manufacturer and said, if you did that, we'd be like, you could have run it in a cave, or you could have run it in a climbing competition venue, in a mechanical sort of built mate. And they really bought on to the idea of the whole ethical side. And then the athletes who were taking part, right, there were some amazing athletes there. The Canadian chap, Gordon MacArthur, was there. Really, really amazing climbers. And they actually all bought into it too, and it meant that they really had to work together on the routes. Like the competitors actually had to work together to make the routes and get these slots in. And then when it came to the competition, they all flew up it really, really quickly. But there was no sort of extra drilling, there was no bolts placed, and we did it as environmentally friendly as we could, considering the chalk is all crumbling to the sea anyway. And it repairs really, really quickly, a bit like an ice climb. So, it was a really interesting event, but, the company who were sponsoring it actually really bought into the ethics of it. A semi sort of ethics, different from maybe what a pure old-fashioned mountaineer might think, but it was at a very comfortable level. I felt really good. When I took on that work, I was a bit worried, am I selling my soul a bit? But in actual fact, I thought, God, this is really, really interesting, because I'm not really involved. I'm not good enough to be involved in competition climbing. But, it was really interesting.
Right. Finish off with last thoughts from each of you about what comes now.
I'm not finished. I would love to go. I fully intend to spend as much time in the big mountain ranges as other commitments allow. Whether we ever do anything as outrageous as the Mazeno Ridge again, I doubt, frankly. But I love it, and I intend to continue to do it at whatever level I'm capable of, in good company for as many years as I can.
Excellent. Sandy?
Yeah, well, Rick and I have got a couple of objectives, but one of them involves 2 nights above 8,000 meters, and we just think without oxygen that would be hard. That would be, and maybe for older, more mature mountaineers, it might be possible. Certainly for younger guys who are maybe the age that we were when we did the Mazeno, that could well be a possibility. But to go there at our age, people would say, "Well, what fools you guys are." So I don't know if I'm really inspired to go yet. Like climbing the Mazeno Ridge really fed my sort of inner rat, and I feel really satisfied. And the last 2 years I've been kind of just cruising and getting fat and things, and now I want to, I'd really like to rock climb a lot better. And but I've probably got my my calf muscles are probably too big from front pointing to drag them up a hard route. But I would like to do more technical, shorter, maybe not so high, 6,000 meter peaks sort of things, just nice, or over here, just nice, really good technical climbs. So that's what I'd really like to do. But I do still have an inkling to, like Rick's got a couple of plans, and there's, we're talking about stuff, and we're still interested.
Mm-hmm. And do it together.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, without a doubt.
Great. Congratulations. It's a fascinating story, and thanks so much for your time here today.